Thank you so much. I'm very excited about tonight's presentation. My name is Shannon. Um, this was kind of inspired by the fact that I'm really interested in the cosmos on a personal level. And I love Carl Sagan, and he had a lot of writing about that. One of his quotes is, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself." This idea that humans have a connection to outer space, which seems like two separate things. And he wrote that the way to find out about our place in the universe is by examining the universe and by examining ourselves. So I love to think about the human aspect of space, even though we don't really think that there are any humans in space. We're in space and we're all made up of the same stuff. So, to me, that's like so interesting. And it's a paradox with the fact that space is cold, vast, lonely, scary. You can't breathe that well. All of these different things together. People think about going to space. It seems like a terrible idea. Why would we go up there? Why would we go out there? And then we see astronauts that do go out there. Can you even imagine how uncomfortable it must be? If like, it's not only different, you have no privacy on a spacecraft, you have no space, you have no creature comforts whatsoever. No matter where you come from, you're definitely not comfortable on that ship. And almost the only thing that you could imagine could be comforting would maybe be the food. So it made me interested in, what do they eat? What possibly could work up there? Not to mention that physiologically you get all messed up there. So how do you make your body work better up there? And we're making so many advances in science. You see sports making so many advances now, and we just know so much more about nutrition. It made me wonder if we've made a lot of progress in that regard. So here we are. You can give a lot of the thanks for the aesthetics of this. I wanted this to be like really bright and neon and cool, to my husband, who is responsible for like the look of the PowerPoint. That is not me. Okay. So, tonight we're really not talking about the technical stuff, black holes, exoplanets, or rocket trajectories. Oh, you moved on? That's okay. Okay, second slide. That's fine. Yeah. Here's what we're serving up tonight. Think of it as a 7-course meal. We'll start with the early days, tubes, cubes, and crumbs. And then we'll bust some myths, like, did astronauts really eat the chalky freeze-dried ice cream? Spoiler alert, no. We'll get into the science of why nothing tastes right in space, why astronauts are obsessed with hot sauce, and what zero gravity does to your stomach. And we'll cover some food scandals. Yes, there was a congressional hearing about a sandwich. We'll tour the international menus above the International Space Station, from Russian borscht to Japanese ramen to French foie gras. We'll look at the first real space oven. And finally, we'll peek at the future menu for Mars. And of course, we'll wrap up with a little quiz to test your knowledge. So loosen your belts. Hopefully, this is going to be fun. Next slide. Thank you. The early days. If you can't chew it, squeeze it. Let's go back to the very beginning. So in 1958, Project Mercury, NASA had a problem. They had to feed a human in space in an environment where crumbs can float into sensitive instruments. So just remember that nothing is falling down to the floor, and anything that turns into a crumb is going to start blocking your equipment. Liquids could freeze, liquids could bubble unpredictably. Any weight that shouldn't be there, every cubic centimeter of space was important. So it was the weight, it was the space, it was the freezing. So their solution was aluminum tubes, basically toothpaste, right? Toothpaste filled with beef stew or applesauce or vegetables. So that's what they started with. And alongside the tubes, they would have these dry, bite-sized cubes that were coated in like a gelatin. So like a bouillon cube covered in flavorless jello. Um, to keep them from crumbling into dust. So that's what they would eat. Like after sort of, if you can imagine like a long day where like you're really exhausted and you don't have your family and you don't know if you're going to make it back, and then you got to squeeze a carrot into your mouth. So here's the thing, right? The astronauts hated it. The food was bland, the texture was weird, and eating from a tube was not dignified. John Glenn, America's first orbital astronaut, actually had to prove that humans could swallow in zero gravity. So that was something that we were not 100% sure about. Could you swallow, right? Um, so that was a real concern. NASA doctors weren't sure if you could swallow without gravity pulling the food down. And Glenn proved that you could, but it wasn't a gourmet experience, and he wasn't happy about it. And by the Gemini program in 1965, things did improve slightly. We started with freeze-dried food. So the famous example is a shrimp cocktail that was freeze-dried. So freeze-dried, all the water was removed, and it was like vacuum sealed, right, and frozen. And the spicy cocktail sauce came as a dry powder. So they would inject cold water into the baggie, into like a sealed pouch, and they would knead it around, right, in order to rehydrate the shrimp. They would squeeze in sauce, right, and then they would eat it with a spoon. It was okay. It was very bland, and it was cold. It wasn't warm, right? So we think about like being uncomfortable. Like comfort food is usually warm. It's still kind of cold and bland and not restaurant quality, but at least you were eating with a spoon and you weren't squeezing toothpaste into your mouth. Then came Apollo, and this was a real breakthrough. For the first time, the Apollo command module had both hot and cold water. So hot water was a real luxury, right? Astronauts use a special water probe, like a water syringe, right, that injected 1/2 ounce of water into a freeze-dried meal bag. So this is a little bit more similar to like a military meal thingamajig. They were essentially the same as a modern camping MRE, a flexible pouch with a nozzle. And a hot water made a massive difference to flavor, right? Because then the oils can come out and everything. In fact, the very first food eaten on the moon was a bacon cube. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong had bacon squares as part of their first meal on the lunar surface. Apollo also gave us the spoon bowl, a bowl shaped like a petri dish, sealed with a clear lid that let astronauts eat with a real spoon. The spoon was held by magnetism or Velcro, so it wouldn't float away. It sounds simple, but psychologically, being able to kind of eat with that spoon and put it down on the plate was a big help for them on the flight. It made astronauts feel a little more human. And that theme, holding on to your humanity through food, kind of keeps coming up again and again. So now we're going to bust some myths. Raise your hand if you've ever bought astronaut ice cream. Yes. Thank you. Very fun. Me too. It's the chalky, crumbly, freeze-dried block that dissolves in your tongue. Here's the truth. That stuff was developed for Apollo, but it never actually flew in space. And I can imagine you can think of why. It's too crumbly, right? It's way too crumbly. Those crumbs could float into equipment. Astronauts didn't even like it that much. So it's really not worth anything except the gift shop staple. You might find some here. But it was never really space food. The real ice cream story is more interesting. Skylab, NASA's first space station, launched in 1973, had 5 electric freezers. 5. So it's like I ran the nutrition program at that time. The station ran on massive solar panels, and those freezers worked perfectly. They stored frozen steaks, prime rib, and full-size frozen vanilla ice cream in individual cups. So if someone says astronauts don't eat real ice cream, they have in the past. The reason the ISS doesn't have a food freezer today is just power, limited power. The ISS generates limited electricity, and the freezers that do exist are reserved for like science samples. So real ice cream only flies when there's spare cold space in the science freezer. Another myth, Tang. Here's a fun fact: NASA did not invent Tang. It was actually created in 1957 by a food chemist, William Mitchell, who also developed Pop Rocks, if anybody remembers those, for General Foods. And it sold poorly, was not a good seller, Tang, until John Glenn drank it on his Mercury flight in 1962. If you can imagine, the astronaut was like a celebrity who made people drink the drink. I wonder if people now could name any of the astronauts who went up, right, this summer. It's just so interesting to think of that contrast. I see humans.
Shannon, we all nagged our parents for
You all like, okay.
Tang during Project Mercury. When you say it became popular, and none of us like Tang. Tang, so we all nagged our parents.
Fascinating. That's so interesting to me. Yes, the orange drink, Tang, the orange drink. Yes. So Zilcho, yeah, Zilcho. It is. I'm sure it had negative. I'm sure it was just full of. Yeah, it had sugar, right? It was. The astronauts did not like it at all, actually, and they described it as overly sweet. It was convenient because it was a powder that could be rehydrated, but it was just a powdered orange drink. It wasn't anything fancy. Um, so the reality is kind of interesting. Moving on to smell. You can't smell in space, sort of, right? Let's talk about why space food is such a challenge from a biological perspective, right? Have you ever noticed that airplane food tastes kind of bland when you're on a plane? And there's a reason for that, and it's related to what happens in space. In microgravity, your body fluids shift upward, right? That's why the guy's head looks like that. This causes what astronauts call puffy face syndrome, and their face literally swells up. And it also congests their nasal passages. It's like having a permanent head cold. So, up to 80% of what we perceive as taste is actually smell, or this is what they say. So, when your nose is congested, your sense of smell is dulled and everything tastes muted and bland. So, they're also not tasting well up there. Um, Astronauts have described eating in space as like eating a gourmet burger through a snorkel. So even if it were very good, they wouldn't really be able to appreciate it. You can kind of taste the basic elements, but the complex uh, aromas or flavors that come through that make food really delicious doesn't translate at all. And on top of that, the ISS recycles cabin air to almost zero humidity to prevent the condensation on the electronics. So that dry air dries out your nose, like if you can think of the heater in the winter when your nose gets very dry. And your taste receptors then are not as sensitive. And so that makes the problem even worse. Some astronauts say food tastes like cardboard for the first several days of their trip between all of these things together. The good news is after a few days in orbit, the body adapts somewhat. The fluid shift kind of stabilizes a little bit. The taste perception improves a little bit, but it doesn't return to like Earth normal. So that's why flavorful, spicy, aromatic foods are so important in space. Interestingly, newer spacecraft, so this is kind of interesting, like China's Tiangong station, have zoned humidity control. So they have like chambers, right? Allowing different cabin areas to maintain different moisture levels. So you can go into like the moist room when you're eating or something like that. Or when you're sleeping, maybe. Next generation spacecrafts will likely feature adjustable humidity in dining and sleeping quarters specifically to address this issue. Yes. This is a great point that you bring up, obviously. Yeah, well, I am no oxygen expert, but I believe that they bring the air with them and they keep filtering it and recycling it. And so they have a certain they have equipment that manages the oxygen level on the space station. They certainly don't open the door, right? And stuff like that. But it is a very self-contained unit.
They have something called scrubber that removes the carbon dioxide.
Thank you.
From the air and store it as carbon, right? And so that is a big problem because carbon dioxide, when it builds up to a certain concentration, is poisonous. So they really do have to scrub it out. Even though they bring oxygen, they still have to remove an air.
And what do they do? Have like containers of carbon dioxide? Fascinating. Okay.
On a passenger spacecraft, passenger airplane. Right? Well, airplane.
Let's get no. They have to scrub. They have to scrub the air from the outside.
Yeah, it's compressed in. It's compressed in.
Okay.
Engine number one. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you, audience member. Okay, fabulous. What does it smell like inside the spacecraft? In case you're interested, astronauts describe it as a sharp metallic, like it smells like gunpowder. It's not pleasant, but they do get used to it. And it's because of the hot electronics, the recycled air, the kind of materials off-gassing in a sealed environment. So it is a little bit of a strange smell. So it's not necessarily like the Bath and Body Works or something like that.
Chris Hadfield described it as smelling like a dead locker room.
Wow, that's worse.
Any body odors,
yes,
have no place to go.
Right.
So the ISS, yes, they have these scrubbers.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the questions because we can't hear them.
And I can't say I've ever sat down to eat in a dirty, nasty locker room. So
when their sinuses fill with fluid, they can't smell it.
Yes, they can't hear us.
They're thankful.
They're thankful. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, there are some upsides. Okay. Pass the hot sauce. Okay, pass the hot sauce, please. How astronauts fight the bland. So if everything tastes bland, what do astronauts do, right? They fight back with what they have, and what they have is spice. Spicy, bitter, and umami flavors survive much better in space than sweet and salty. The same thing happens at airplanes at 30,000 feet. Your sweet and salty perception drops by about 30%. But spicy and bitter flavors are largely unaffected. That's one of the reasons many airplane passengers crave tomato juice or spicy Bloody Mary. The strong, savory flavors cut through that sensory dullness. NASA's solution is what they call the condiment bar. Astronauts have access to hot sauce, wasabi, spices, garlic paste, and more. The ISS is regularly stocked with Tabasco and sriracha. And by the way, the Artemis II crew had 5 varieties of hot sauce on their mission. International crews bring local favorites, Japanese miso, Korean gochujang, and Indian pickles. So if you think that they're not interested in food, they certainly are as well. Here's the fascinating neuroscience behind it. Spiciness triggers the trigeminal nerve, which bypasses the dulled smell receptor. So even when an astronaut's nose is congested, capsaicin, that chemical from the hot pepper, still registers as intense and flavorful. So it can be a sensory workaround when you're all stuffed up. One important rule, though, condiments must be liquid. No powdered spices, no salt shakers. In microgravity, remember the loose particles, they float everywhere. They can get into your eyes, into your lungs, into the equipment. So salt is dissolved in water, pepper suspended in oil, hot sauce comes in squeeze bottles. Cosmonauts have long preferred spicy dishes like horseradish and mustard, which helps explain why Russian space food is famously bold. When American and Russian crews first started sharing meals in the ISS, many American astronauts were surprised about how intensely flavored the Russian food was, but then they quickly came to love it because they're in this new environment. Next slide. Your stomach has no idea what's up. Okay, let's talk about after the food goes down, right? Microgravity doesn't just mess with your taste buds, it messes with your entire digestive system. So we're not going to go through to the end of that product, but we'll deal with the middle product. On Earth, gravity helps pull food through your digestive tract. In space, without the downward pull, your stomach empties 20% slower. So that means that it sits in your stomach longer, you're bloated, you're nauseous, you get acid reflux. Astronauts call it space stomach. It's one of the reasons many astronauts feel nauseous during their first few days in orbit. And it's not just motion sickness, it's literally their digestive system is trying to figure out what to do without gravity. NASA nutritionists have developed several strategies to help. So this is where the nutritional science comes in. First, astronauts eat smaller, more frequent meals, 6 smaller snacks instead of 3 large meals to avoid overloading the stomach. Second, some meals include digestive enzyme supplements to help break down food more quickly. And third, they've started adding gut health supplements. So all those probiotics you're taking, right? Prebiotics, probiotics to the menus because microgravity increases intestinal permeability, what's sometimes called leaky gut. So you're not getting all the nutrients from your food. So the probiotics and prebiotics help with that. There's even an ultrasound breakfast club among cosmonauts. So they use a portable ultrasound scanners right after breakfast to watch their stomachs emptying, which is kind of neat. And their intestines move. And it sounds bizarre, but it is giving researchers real-time data on how digestion works in microgravity. What is it like? How is it different? How long does it take? What foods digest quickly? What foods take longer? You know, what helps nausea, what hurts nausea, and this and that. And here's something cutting edge. NASA's experimenting with personalized nutrition. They're using gene expression and microbiome data to tailor each astronaut's diet to their specific genetic and biological needs. So the idea is that on a long duration mission to Mars, where resupply is impossible, every calorie needs to be optimized for that person's health. So if you can think of how you're sort of different from someone else, maybe you're lactose intolerant, they're not, those kinds of things would magnify over a long period of time. And then you would really need some personalized nutrition, especially if you're not digesting well in the first place. Onto the scandal. The Great Sandwich Scandal of 1965. One of my favorite stories in space history about food, March 23rd, 1965, astronaut John Young smuggled a 2-day-old corned beef sandwich on rye into his spacesuit pocket before the Gemini 3 launch. This is definitely something I would have done. Here's the backstory. Young and his commander, Gus Grissom, were absolutely sick of the official space food. Grissom had complained for weeks during training that he was bored, because remember, when they train, they were going to practice eating that food so they can get used to it. So they were bored with the dehydrated delicacies that NASA had provided. Young described the official chicken bites as barely edible. So Young had a brilliant, terrible idea. He'd bring a real sandwich. He asked fellow astronaut Wally Schira, who was known as a prankster, to pick up a corned beef sandwich from Wolfie's restaurant in Cocoa Beach. Schira bought it. Young slipped it into his spacesuit pocket on the way to the launch pad, and 2 hours into the flight, he pulled it out and offered it to Grissom. The air-to-ground transcript, right? The transcript of this is pretty priceless. Grissom asks, "What is it?" And Young says, "Corned beef sandwich." And Grissom says, "Where did that come from?" Young says, "I brought it with me. Let's see how it tastes. Smells good, doesn't it?" Grissom took a bite, but the rye bread immediately started crumbling. Crumbs were floating everywhere. Grissom quickly stuffed the sandwich into his own pocket to prevent crumbs from getting into the equipment. So he grabs the sandwich from the guy, puts it in his pocket, and Young admits over the radio, it was a thought, not a very good one. Here's where it gets wild. That 30-second sandwich incident nearly derailed the entire Gemini program. Think of how many millions of dollars or billions they had spent on this. Congress found out about it, and they were furious. Representative George Shipley called Young's antics foolish and said the spacecraft was like a surgeon's operating room, and you don't bring unauthorized items into a sterile, critical environment. NASA Administrator James Webb was so angry that he pressed for a formal report on whether Young should be disciplined. And George Mueller, NASA's associate administrator, famously promised Congress, "We have taken steps to prevent recurrence of corned beef sandwiches in future flights." Robert Gilruth, director of the Manned Spacecraft Center, was more forgiving. He said these antics helped crews break up the strain of spaceflight. But Webb disagreed, saying this was America's space program. You have to remember that too. The whole country, right, was drinking Tang, rooting for these guys. And we're not going to permit individuals to superimpose their judgment as to what is going to be taken on this flight. So ironically, Young never got reprimanded. It didn't hurt his career. He went on to become the first person to fly in space 6 times, walked on the moon on Apollo, commanded the very first space shuttle mission. There's even a replica of the sandwich preserved in acrylic at the Grissom Memorial Museum in Indiana. And in a beautiful twist of fate, corned beef did eventually make it onto the space menu on the first space shuttle mission in 1981, which John Young happened to command. So he was there when they actually served allowed corned beef. Next, the next scandal. The case of the missing space tomato. Let's jump ahead to a more recent food mystery. In 2023, so just a couple of years ago, NASA astronaut Frank Rubio spent 371 days, a little over a year, on the ISS, and for about 8 months of that mission, he was the prime suspect of one of the most bizarre cases in space history, the disappearance of humanity's first space-grown tomato, right? So growing food in space is a high priority. We managed to grow one tomato and it disappeared. Here's what happened. The ISS crew was running the Veg 05 experiment, growing tomatoes in orbit. They successfully grew several tomatoes, but one of them went missing, just vanished. Crewmates jokingly blamed Rubio for the entire rest of his mission, and they accused him of eating it. Rubio insisted he was innocent, but the ribbing continued for months, and then in December 2023, a tiny shriveled tomato was found floating in a plastic bag on the ISS. Rubio was officially exonerated. He later joked that he probably spent more time defending his innocence over that tomato than he did on some of his actual scientific experiments. But the bigger picture here is important. Growing fresh food in space isn't just a novelty. It's critical for long duration missions to Mars, where resupply from Earth just won't be possible. The psychological benefit of growing and eating something fresh cannot be overstated. Astronauts who've eaten space-grown lettuce describe it as one of the highlights of their mission. Can you imagine a lettuce being a highlight? It's a taste of Earth, a connection to home, and a reminder of the life they're working to protect. That's such an interesting idea that, you know, we don't really grow that much anymore in our backyards, but when we do, I have my tiny little planter and I'm so proud of it. I feel like I would be very similar. Like, I grew that basil, right? And you're out there and you're alone. It would be really something. Next, international. Around the world in 80 dishes, part 1. One of the best things about the ISS is that it's genuinely international, and that extends to the dinner table. Each space agency brings its own culture to their menu, and crews regularly hold dinner parties where everyone shares their national dishes. Let's start with NASA. American space food is classic comfort food: beef stew, mac and cheese, tortillas, peanut butter, various rehydratable meals. Tortillas are a staple because they don't produce crumbs as much as bread. NASA has about 200 different items in its standard food system, and each astronaut gets to select a personal preference menu that makes up about 20% of their food. Then there's Roscosmos. Am I saying that? Roscosmos. Russia. Russian space food is famously bold and hearty, so borscht, cottage cheese with nuts, beef stroganoff, and caviar. Russian crews have over 300 dishes to choose from. Their food tends to be more heavily seasoned than American food, partially because cosmonauts have always preferred stronger flavors. A typical Russian daily menu might include curds and nuts for breakfast, jellied pike is a fish, perch, and borscht for lunch, rice and meat for dinner, and dried beef with nuts for a late night snack. And then there's the European Space Agency. European astronauts get what they call bonus food, special items from their home countries that serve as psychological support during long missions. French astronauts have enjoyed lobster, foie gras, and French onion soup prepared by Michelin-starred restaurant chefs. When Thomas Pesquet was on the ISS for his birthday, his crewmates surprised him with macarons. I don't know how to say those. ESA also funded the first espresso machine in space. Coffee, woot woot. The ISS Presso, the espresso, which we'll talk about more in a moment. The variety from international partners isn't just a luxury, it's a critical countermeasure against menu fatigue, right? Research shows that astronauts can get bored with their food as early as 2 days into a mission. And by the 1 to 4 month mark, many are losing weight, craving foods that aren't available, and kind of getting down in the dumps. Having international food options give crews something to look forward to and keeps morale high. Around the World in 80 Dishes Part 2. The international tour continues. JAXA, Japan, has developed some truly impressive space cuisine. We're talking space ramen in a special sealed broth, miso soup, sushi, fully cooked, of course, no raw fish, and yakitori, the chicken on the sticks. Japanese space food is developed in collaboration with major food companies like Ajinomoto, Meiji Dairies, and Nissin Foods. The ramen is particularly tricky because broth behaves weirdly in microgravity, so they had to develop special containers. CNSA China has over 120 items on the space menu, including kung pao chicken and 8 treasure rice pudding. Chinese space food has evolved dramatically since their first crewed missions. Early Chinese astronauts had fairly basic rations, but now the Tiangong space station has sophisticated meals, and we'll see on the next slide that China is the first nation to have an actual oven on in orbit. ISRO, India, has contributed amras, which is mango juice, moong dal, halva. They've even grown fenugreek sprouts in orbit. When Indian-American astronaut Sunita Williams was on the ISS, she brought samosas to celebrate her father's heritage and Slovenian sausages to celebrate her mother's culture. Food is deeply personal, and astronauts use it to maintain their connection to their roots. I should also mention some other contributions. South Korea's first astronaut, Yi So-yeon, brought a special space-safe version of kimchi in 2008. It took 3 research institutes several years and over $1 million to develop a fermented cabbage dish that wouldn't explode or spoil in space. And if you can't smell kimchi, then really something wrong with you. When Italian astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti wanted to try cricket protein, ESA had a candy bar made with cricket flour just for her. And for the first Polish mission to the ISS in 2025, a company developed freeze-dried pierogi, which required solving the problem of how to rehydrate dumplings without being able to drain excess water. Their solution was to add freeze-dried vegetable broth to the pouch so astronauts could drink the broth first and then eat the pierogi. That's what I love about space food. It's not just nutrition. It's diplomacy, it's culture, it's identity, it's comfort. Moving on to barbecue. In 2025, China achieved a genuine culinary first. They sent a convection oven to the Tiangong space station and cooked the first meal from raw ingredients in orbit, raw meat. The first space barbecue menu was Orleans flavored chicken wings and black pepper steak. This was not a simple microwave. This was China's hot air baking machine, the first orbital oven designed specifically for cooking raw food. It solves engineering challenges that sound like something out of a cooking show. They had special racks to secure the food, catalytic filtration to eliminate the smoke and the grease vapor, right? Because that has to go somewhere, because you definitely don't want smoke floating around a space station. And it heats to 190 Celsius or 374 degrees Fahrenheit for a crispy crust. The chicken wings and steak cooked in 28 minutes. Think about what this means. So for 60 years, space food was kind of preservation, rehydration, and this is the first time we've genuinely moved from reheat and eat to cook from scratch in orbit. So it really is a revolution. Some of you might be thinking, didn't astronauts bake cookies on the ISS a few years ago? Yes. In 2019, the ISS got a zero-G oven, courtesy of DoubleTree by Hilton, and a company called Zero G Kitchen. Astronauts Luca Parmitana and Christina Koch baked chocolate chip cookies from raw dough. But here's the wild part. On Earth, a DoubleTree cookie bakes in 16 to 18 minutes at 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And in space, the first successful cookie took 130 minutes at a higher temperature. So it was over 2 hours for a cookie. No one's entirely sure why the difference is so dramatic. may have to do with how heat moves in microgravity without convection currents. The cookies were returned to Earth, studied by food scientists, and so China wasn't technically the first to bake in space, but they were the first to install a true convection oven capable of cooking a full meal from raw ingredients. The universe's barbecue restaurant is officially open for business. Okay, what's next? Oh, yes, if we can get it to work. Oh, okay. Yes. This is the zero gravity cup. So they can drink coffee in space. Yeah, the sound is tough because we don't have it. But basically, the cup is designed to hold the liquid in place so it doesn't come out. So in space, the liquid will form bubbles, but this is designed so it doesn't have that. And the angle of the cup somehow helps it flow. Yay.
Hello, hello. Can anybody hear us here online?
And I think he founded a whole company.
Hello.
I guess not, George.
Hi, George. They
Very
don't
cool.
hear us.
Yeah,
I'm screaming loudly.
very
I'm sorry.
cool.
Maybe they will hear us.
The
Hello.
cup?
Anybody out there hearing us?
Okay.
Online
This is the
people?
oven. So you can see that it really does
Beep,
look like an
beep,
oven,
go
but this is
home.
how it. Yeah, it is kind of like the Jetsons, but you see they're floating in there. The little chickens are floating in there. And yeah, so they're going to cook for 28 minutes, but this is how they kind of secure them in place. Look how excited they look. I mean, honestly, this must be the bright part of their day. Yeah, and they're probably hungry. It honestly looks decent. I mean, it doesn't look bad. I feel like they would each want more than one. So I feel bad that they only get that one. But in any case, he said these fresh chicken wings are making my mouth water. I mean, look at the environment. It just doesn't look like fun, but it's nice that they have that. Oh, leave a big one for the cameraman. They were nice. So they wanted, and you can just see how much that they're enjoying it. Even if the rest of their food is toothpaste, it feels like at least they have, this one thing kind of. He said, so now they're going to make steak. Is that in the video too? Okay. And so you can see the steak is in there. They're from Inner Mongolia where they eat a lot of meat. And so they're like, holy smoke. Just from the color alone, they already look great. I don't know the answer to that. That is a question. How do they clean their utensils? I don't know, but I didn't see them using utensils here, but we know that they use spoons from here. I don't know how they clean the utensils, but I would imagine they have to clean a lot of things, and I don't really know how they clean a lot of things. That's my next presentation, the cleaning, right? How do they clean? Is this the Mars? Yes. Okay. So where is all this heading? If we're going to send humans to Mars, right? A journey of 6 to 9 months just to get there, followed by a stay of months or years, we can't possibly bring all of the food that they're going to need. The math just doesn't work. So a Mars mission would require thousands of pounds of food, and every pound launched costs thousands of dollars. So we need to figure out how to make food there. So they are developing technologies, how to make food there because we can't bring it all with us. First up, 3D printed food. Companies like BHEX are developing printers that use powdered ingredients, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and preloaded oil cartridges. So interesting to think about, right? So you select a meal on a screen. The printer layers the ingredients and bakes them in under 5 minutes. It sounds like science fiction, but it is real. Some prototypes can even turn plastic waste into edible biomass using special bacteria that break down the plastics into proteins, which are then printed into food bars. Second, lab-grown meat. European Space Agency is funding in-orbit cultured meat research, growing real muscle tissue from animal cells without the need for slaughter. So the first space-grown chicken nugget could happen within 5 years. Right now, the estimated cost to feed one astronaut on a Mars mission is about $25,000 a day. Lab-grown meat could slash that, right, dramatically if we could just bring some proteins with us and grow it there. Third, microalgae and fungi. I don't know how delicious that's going to be, but the European Space Agency's AFCIS project grows spirulina and filamentous fungi together using only water, carbon dioxide, and minimal electricity. So if it comes down to it, just going to be eating slime. The fungi are then 3D printed into food that resembles meat or fish. It's incredibly efficient. You're essentially turning astronaut exhaled breath into dinner. Fourth, Martian greenhouses. NASA's veggie system and advanced plant habitat are already testing how crops grow in Martian simulated soil, low pressure, and reduced light. The goal isn't just lettuce. We're trying to think of sustenance, potatoes, wheat, soybeans, eventually maybe a farm, right? Here's the beautiful part. Every food technology developed for space has direct applications for food security on Earth, right? Just like so many other scientific technologies when it comes to space and exploration have translated themselves into our everyday life. 3D printing can reduce food waste, right? Lab-grown meat can reduce the environmental impact of livestock farming. Microalgae system can produce protein in areas that have limited agriculture. When we can solve the problem of feeding astronauts on Mars, we'll also be solving problems for feeding people here on Earth, right? Okay, who's ready for the quiz? Before we wrap up, let's see how much you remember, Doodles. We're going to do a quick 6-question quiz. Feel free to call out answers. This is a friendly crowd. Question 1. Why does food taste bland in space? Smell is compromised. Very good. One of the reasons smell is compromised, microgravity causes fluid to shift right to the head, causing nasal congestion, dull sense of smell. 80% of taste is smell. When your nose is stuffed, everything tastes muffled, right? Think of a really bad cold. Excellent. Question 2. What type of food do astronauts crave to compensate for the blandness? Hot sauce. Very good. Spicy and bold flavors. Hot sauce, wasabi, strong spices. And also because capsaicin triggers the trigeminal nerve and bypasses the dull smell receptors. Question 3. What unique digestive problem do astronauts experience in microgravity? Digestive problem. Very good. Actually, that wasn't the listed, but that's true. Leaky gut is one of them. That is 100% true. The answer on the paper is delayed gastric emptying, right? Your food just stays in your stomach for longer, for 20% longer, and so they call it space stomach. I imagine that is a big part, yes, of how they kind of keep things going and moving. I don't know that you really want to exercise right after you eat, but I would think that you need to exercise just to keep everything moving and everything like that. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe they are doing some exercise. I mean, that's definitely worth looking into. Right. For sure, that's definitely for their bones and the health that way because and their muscles because they're not really no impact up there. Yeah. Question 4. Which country has an orbital oven for baking barbecue? China. On the Tiangong space station, they cooked chicken wings and black pepper steak just last year. Very good. Look at these visuals, people. I love it. Okay, question 5. What food item caused a major scandal and a congressional hearing in 1965? Corned beef, very good. John Young smuggled it onto Gemini 3, and Congress was not amused. Right, exactly. Yes, that's right. Wolfie said priceless advertising. Question 6. Which space agency packs foie gras and lobster for his astronauts? That's right, ESA. French astronauts have enjoyed some truly gourmet meals in orbit. Final thoughts, right? Food is more than fuel. What have we learned? Space isn't just about survival. It's not just about research. It's not just about, getting out there. And cowboys have hearts too, right? Even though these are people who are very strong-willed, determined, disciplined, they're still humans, right? They still need comfort and contact, connection to home. They very much want to maintain that over the course of their trip. Otherwise, it's hard for them to keep up their morale. Yeah. So it's about culture, it's about psychology, it's about what it means to be humans. From squeeze tube to Michelin star meals, space food has evolved as dramatically as the missions themselves. What astronauts eat reflect who they are, right? Their cultures, their comforts, their humanity, and the future of space food will definitely define whether humanity can truly live beyond Earth, right? On the moon, on the Mars, and beyond. There's a quote from the French gastronome Jean-Antoine Briat-Savarin. I'm just going to pretend that I can do that. In 1825, tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. In space, this is truer than ever. When we look at what we feed our explorers, we're looking at what we value as a civilization. Do we want them to merely survive, or do we want them to thrive, to feel at home, to stay connected to the world they left behind? The next generation of astronauts, the ones who will walk on Mars, are probably middle school or high school right now. I like to think that when they sit down for their first dinner on the red planet, maybe decades from now, they'll be eating something that connects them not just to Earth, but to every astronaut who came before them, from John Glenn squeezing applesauce from a tube, to Samantha Cristoforetti sipping espresso from the zero-G cup, to future astronauts biting into a tomato they grew themselves in a Martian greenhouse. Food is our oldest technology, our oldest tradition, our oldest form of community. And we're going to become a multiplanetary species. If we're going to become a multiplanetary species, it will be the meals we share that make us feel at home, no matter which world we're on. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm happy to take any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll just tell you. If anyone's tried astronaut ice cream, tell me what you thought of it. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wonder if we can ask any questions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I may defer to the audience for some of them. I basically know most of what I know is in here.
I'm astounded with your illustrations.
Yes, very good.
How did you do those?
This is all Dan. So I will say that I too love the actual PowerPoint itself. I told him kind of what my goal was, and he really
This is
took that and ran with
astounding.
it. Yeah,
I
the
mean,
PowerPoint itself is
And
tremendous.
It's fun as well.
Yes.
Even
yes.
though it's a serious subject.
Right. I was trying to make it like a little bit more fun. I am a serious person, but I also think that like astronomy doesn't always have to be that way, and we can kind of open up to that. And because this was kind of more the human side, I thought we would do that. Yeah.
Perfect.
That was
That's
great.
That was good.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Yay.
Great topic too.
Yay. Okay.